Hey, how you doing? This is Adam Post, publisher of more than 1,000 comic books, and I've been covering Disney very closely these last several months. There is a bloodbath coming to Disney. It is going to be a massive firing. Now, we've already been covering this. There are supposed to be 7,000 positions being canceled at Disney. Now, canceled means just this. There are not 7,000 layoffs. I keep saying this because it's important. 3,000 positions that were opened are not going to be hired for. But 4,000 people are losing their jobs. It's terrible when people lose their jobs. There are suicides from people losing their jobs. Some of this is mismanagement from Disney. Some of it is their woke ideology. A lot of this is just the poor management of Bob Iger not dealing with structuring the company appropriately. You can reposition people in their jobs. They don't all have to just be fired. Also, you don't have to have mass hiring that you don't need. These things could be done a lot more carefully. Bob Iger has never been much of a manager over at Disney, and yes, he's been forced by Nelson Peltz. He's been forced by Dan Loeb of Third Point Capital, another activist investor who was pushing for changes at the company, and he had to agree that they need to restructure the company. That said, they probably would have restructured the company eventually anyway, because the company had tremendous losses in its streaming, and it can't fool around with having all of these additional expenses and not enough money coming in the door. Of course, a major contributor to this is the push of the woke ideology and the damaging of their classic franchises, where they have decided it's more important for them to push what they think people are going to be living like in the future with all of their progressive agendas on top of existing classic franchises, which make these franchises perform poorly. Marvel was doing great for 11 years, but then they had to go and change the nature of the Marvel Universe into something else that was supposed to be more inclusive and have more representation. And the thing of that is it's fine to have characters, of course, of different genders, of different ways, of different interests, of whatever you want to do. That's fine. But you can't make that a bigger deal than honoring what the franchise is supposed to be about. And what it's supposed to be about is what it's always been about. Same thing happened, of course, to Star Wars. They even managed to do it with Pixar, which is kind of ridiculous if you think about it. Toy Story, they're just toys. Like, let them just do toy stuff. No, they can't have that at Disney. So now, as a result, you have to have these cutbacks happening because the losses are just too big. This is coming from Deadline. I'm going to cover it in more detail. Bracing for the bloodbath, Disney layoffs to resume on this coming Monday. Before we get into the article, please be sure you are subscribed to the channel. Click the bell for notifications and give me a thumbs up. I really appreciate you guys. It was originally described as the big one, or even pointedly a straight-up bloodbath. Either way, the lion's share of the layoffs at Disney are expected to begin Monday. From April 24th to the 27th, there will be Mouse House employees in film and TV losing their jobs every single day except Friday. Now, this has all been planned out by HR. Eisner has very highly paid, certainly a few really strong, competent executives who can roll all of this out. He can snap his fingers. He doesn't need to deal with any of it. And this is going to happen next week. To say that anxiety is high is an understatement. Just about everyone who works on Buena Vista Street in Burbank is on high alert, wondering whether their number is up. Quote, there is a sense of foreboding that the cuts are going to be wide, large scale, and very meaningful, an industry source said, noting how low company morale is right now amid persistent rumors that at least one person from each department would have to go. The sweeping layoffs are among the first major moves for Bob Iger since his surprise return as Disney CEO in late November. Quote, it sucks to be honest, the longtime film executive at the company said. Iger coming back got everyone's hope up for investment in people as well as creativity. Truth is, if you're not operating a ride at the parks, you could be on the chopping block. Maybe the worst part is still not knowing who is being let go, no matter how much time you put in. One employee even begged a Deadline reporter to find out if their job was still safe. Pray for me, another texted. Iger confirmed in March that 3 rounds of layoffs would occur as the company looks to reduce its workforce by about 7,000 employees in an effort to reach $5.5 billion in overall cost savings. Again, those 7,000 employees are going to be 4,000 actual layoffs and 3,000 new people not hired. The initial round came a few days before the company's annual shareholder meeting, April 3rd, and involved the consolidation of production operations across Disney TV studios, Hulu, Freeform, and FX, and the shutdown of the studio operations creative acquisitions department. A small business unit that was focused on exploring the metaverse was also active. And creative acquisitions is really them acquiring content and acquiring talent projects. They don't need to acquire projects. They're cutting back a lot on their production, which leads to some other really interesting speculation And this is way out there in terms of speculation. Disney potentially selling Star Wars, Kathleen Kennedy supposedly saying bad things about Kevin Feige to Bob Iger. And I don't think it's because they're going to sell Star Wars. I think it's for a different reason. I think it's because Bob Iger is seriously considering merging Lucasfilm's production division with Marvel's production division. It makes a lot of financial sense. There's kind of no excuse not to do it, with the exception of figuring out how to get Kathleen Kennedy out of the way. Kevin Feige doesn't say boo about anything. He'll just do whatever and cash the checks. He doesn't care, and that's fine. But Kathleen Kennedy is quite mouthy and seems to be upset about what's been going on at Disney. The second much bigger wave of layoffs next week will get Disney close to the 7,000 goal we hear. Virtually every Disney entertainment entity, TV networks, studios, and film studios is expected to be affected in a significant way. According to sources, the various division heads were given cost targets. They translate to different percentages of the workforce for each unit, which could amount to 5% to 10% to even 15% or more in some cases, Deadline has heard. Network programming and studio marketing are believed to be among the areas that will take the hit this time, and there will be a new round of cuts at ABC News, which already underwent layoffs last month. The remnants of the dismantled Disney Media and Entertainment distribution are an obvious target as well. Then, of course, there's Hulu. The parts of the company focused on streaming are particularly on edge, giving the mounting intrigue about Disney's plans for Hulu, particularly since it contributed to overall losses in streaming of $1.5 billion in the most recent quarter. The company took full operational control of Hulu in 2019, but Comcast still has a 33% financial stake in a put-call arrangement slated to take effect in early 2024. Disney can buy out Comcast, but Iger has recently said that, quote, everything is on the table. The agreement states that the minimum value of Hulu will be $27.5 billion at the time of a transaction. That means Disney would have to commit to shelling out at least $9 billion at the same time it's cutting staff and is planning to restore its stock dividend after suspending it during COVID. Now, while Disney did suspend their stock dividend during COVID, they also did it because they're losing so much money on their streaming service, Disney Plus. But they've committed to restoring it even in a minor way, which would help sustain the stock price overall. Quote, Hulu will definitely be one place to watch for these cutbacks, observed one high-level exec at another media company. Since they took control, they've kept it US only and managed it pretty conservatively, meaning it's either going to get beamed up into Disney Plus or they could just let it go entirely. My money's on the former, but that means they could operate it a lot more efficiently. ESPN, now one of 3 business units at the company, a new structure implemented under Iger after he retook the controls from Bob Chapek, will also be under the microscope in terms of cutbacks. A major wrinkle, Disney and ESPN face a looming renewal of multi-billion-dollar NBA rights. In this environment, though, they have to take another hard look at their costs in running all of that infrastructure as they look to keep cash available for rights. That hard look will likely cost veteran employees their jobs next week, so it's terrible to lose a job. You don't want people to lose jobs, but if you're going to have this level of mismanagement of their brand, you're going to lose jobs. Pixar, when it was bought from Steve Jobs, was promised by Bob Iger that they would not mess with the culture. They would not mess with the management. They would not put really hands-on controlling how the content was made and what they were producing. Of course, they were going to coordinate, but the idea was to let Pixar be off on its own business campus as it was and let them make the great content they make the way they make it. But Pixar has also been infected by the woke mind virus, where they have started to make projects that are starting to fail, like Strange Worlds did terrible. But when you get down to it, if you're not going to have a great culture where the fans love your content, and you're not going to have a great culture where the movies actually make money and there's something really special going on about how that management team works together, what is the point of operating completely separate studios from Marvel and Lucasfilm? Lucasfilm has already been stripped down to just focusing on Star Wars. They are literally killing the Indiana Jones franchise. They said they will not be doing more Indiana Jones films. They will not be doing anything else other than Star Wars under Lucasfilm. If they're cutting the production down, I don't know by how much exactly, none of us exactly know, but it looks like they're stopping Marvel's output by at least 50%. That means as they slow projects down at Marvel, and as they've slowed projects down for Star Wars, what are you supposed to do with all of that extra overhead, all of that extra capacity? Now, granted, the quality wasn't good, but just by reducing the output, it doesn't improve quality. Focus improves quality, and attention to detail and skill sets improve quality. So you can reduce the production. But what starts to happen is, let's say they're in business to produce between Marvel Studios and Lucasfilm 5 new films a year, and just for the sake of argument, 5 new shows a year. If you're going to cut that down to 2 or 3 new films a year, and you're going to cut that down to 2 or 3 shows a year, you have so much less demand to produce that content. You have to stop everything that's work in progress and slow it down tremendously, because now you've slowed down the releases of things that were getting closer to being finished, supposedly to make them better. It really only makes sense for Iger to then start looking and saying, look, let me cut back on all of this extra duplicated executives and overhead. Marvel can make terrible Star Wars movies and terrible Star Wars shows just as well as Lucasfilm can, probably better than Kathleen Kennedy can. Now, this is another article. It's rather long. We'll probably have to do a whole separate video on it. But suffice to say, this is a rumor that supposedly Bob Iger is considering selling the Star Wars franchise. It would be great if he would sell the Star Wars franchise. I don't know who could do worse with the Star Wars franchise than Kathleen Kennedy. However, they don't really have an operating business. And all of the things they're doing right now are just shows for Disney Plus. So how could someone come along and buy the Star Wars franchise and then do what? Sell Disney Plus Star Wars TV shows? And then maybe get someone new to work on them? If Sony was to buy Star Wars, which I would think would be like not going to happen, kind of unlikely, what would they do? They would stop providing Disney Plus with Star Wars shows. And then if they would make new films, okay, they have to remake and start from scratch everything that has been going on over at Lucasfilm. They would have to completely gut Lucasfilm. So really, what would they even be paying for? In addition to that, Iger has billions invested in Star Wars libraries. And if you're going to acquire Star Wars, you would have to write a check to pay for all of that production at the inflated values that they're carrying those libraries at. For example, they pay $25 million to make any episode of a Star Wars show. That is very high. Sandman is at like $15 million. So they spend $25 million. Are they all really worth that kind of money? They're really not. So who's writing a check for all of that? And then again, what are you doing with these shows? You're going to sell them back to Disney? It just doesn't make any sense. But what does make sense is there will probably be other massive bloodbaths, other massive restructurings, like we saw when Ike Perlmutter was kicked out of Marvel. They just folded everything he was doing in Marvel Entertainment under the larger Marvel umbrella. And Kevin Feige would be down for this in 2 seconds. He would take over all of Lucasfilm, and it would not even be an additional production output compared to what they were normally producing already at Marvel Studios. Let me know what you think of all this in the comments below. I'm sure you were expecting this bloodbath to happen, but did you know it would be so big? And do you know it would all be next week? Let me know what you think of that. Also, let me know what you think of Disney potentially selling Star Wars. Do you think they would sell Star Wars? Who do you think would buy it? And what would they do with it? Would they sell Disney Plus their Star Wars shows? You know, would they want to keep Kathleen Kennedy? To do what? I don't know, because she hasn't been making Star Wars movies. I'd love to see your comments. Please be sure you are subscribed to the channel. Click the bell for notifications, give me a thumbs up, and I'll see you again soon with another video. And if I don't see you, I will miss you.